The first thing Emma saw every morning was the empty cradle by the window, its wooden bars polished smooth by years of hope. Yet it had never held the weight of a child. The prairie wind rattled the loose glass panes, whispering through her small cabin on the edge of New Mexico territory. Outside, cattle bells chimed faintly, mingling with the sharp cry of a hawk circling over the canyon. But inside, silence pressed heavy on her chest. She would wake, run her palm over the cool, unused quilt her mother had stitched for her future baby, and wonder how long she could bear the ache of a womb that had betrayed her husband. Mark had once held her shoulders firm and promised patience, but patience in the West was thin as paper. Each passing year carved new distance between them. He spent more time with his cattle, more nights out on the range, until his shadow barely crossed their door. By 26, Emma had become a ghost in her own home, defined not by who she was, but by what she could not give. And then on a blazing July afternoon, her world split wide open. Emma had gone to fetch water from the creek, skirts damp with dust, when she heard the distinct rustle of movement in the mesquite. She turned, heart clenching, expecting a rattlesnake or worse, a raider. Instead, a tall figure emerged from the shadows, sun flashing off bare bronze skin. An Apache warrior stood before her. His hair was long, black as a raven's wing, falling past his shoulders, and his chest bore scars that spoke of survival, not surrender. Leather bands circled his arms, and a necklace of bone and turquoise rested against his sternum. His dark eyes locked on hers with such intensity that Emma nearly dropped her bucket. She should have run. She should have screamed. But instead, rooted in that golden dust, she felt something deeper than fear, something dangerous. "You carry sorrow," he said in accented English, voice low as distant thunder. Emma's lips trembled. She hadn't told anyone her heart secret in years. Not even Mark listened anymore. Yet this stranger had read her as if she were a book left open in the sun. Her voice cracked. "I cannot bear children." The words tumbled out. Carried on shame and longing, the warrior stepped closer, so near she could smell the earthy smoke of sage clinging to his skin. He studied her face, not with pity, but with certainty. "That is not the end of your story," he murmured. "The Great Spirit has strange ways. Even barren ground can bloom if the right seed is given." Her breath caught. No man white or Apache had ever spoken to her like this, as though she were more than a burden, as though her emptiness was not a curse, but a promise waiting to be fulfilled. Emma's world tilted. The creek murmured at her back, cicadas screamed in the cottonwoods, and the sky spread wide above them. She had never felt so seen. But then, the sharp crack of a rifle shattered the moment. From the ridge above, dust plumed where a rider galloped her. Husband Mark, gun raised, fury written across his face. "Emma," he roared, "get away from him." Emma froze between the two men, her husband who had given up on her, and the warrior who spoke of hope. Her heart thundered like a trapped horse, knowing that whatever choice she made in this breath would change her life forever. Mark's shout ripped through the canyon air like a whip, jerking Emma back into herself. The bucket in her hand sloshed over, spilling cool water onto her boots. Her heart hammered as she looked from her husband barreling down the ridge to the warrior standing so still, like the earth itself. The Apache did not flinch. His gaze remained fixed on Emma, as though the thundering hoofbeats behind her were nothing more than wind. "You must choose what you carry," he said, his words steady, low. Mark's horse slid to a stop, hooves tearing at the soil. He swung off, rifle aimed, chest heaving with fury. "Get away from her," he barked, sweat streaking the dirt on his temple. His eyes flicked to Emma, wild with a mixture of anger and fear. "Emma, what are you doing? Don't you know what he is?" Emma tried to speak, but her throat closed. The warrior's presence had unraveled something deep in her, something Mark had never touched. She felt exposed, guilty, yet strangely alive. The Apache lifted his chin, his broad shoulders catching the last light of the sinking sun. "I am." "Nanton," he said simply, voice carrying without force. "I mean her no harm." "No harm?" Mark spat, cocking the rifle. "You people raid ranches, burn homes, steal women. And you—" his voice cracked like breaking glass as he jabbed the rifle toward Emma. "You're standing there like you're tempted." The word stung. Tempted. Was that what it was? Emma pressed a hand to her chest, trembling, unsure if it was fear or something sharper thrumming inside her. Nanton stepped forward, and the rifle barrel swung toward him. "The woman suffers," he said, calm as stone. "I speak truth. Her spirit cries out like the wind in winter. You do not hear it, but I do." Mark's jaw tightened. "You shut your mouth." Emma's lips parted. Her husband had never acknowledged her pain, never said aloud what hollowed her out every night. And now, a man she had known for only moments had put it into words. Her cheeks burned, shame and relief colliding. "Mark?" she whispered, barely, finding her voice. "He's right." Her husband whipped his gaze toward her, disbelief painted across his features. "Emma, you don't know what you're saying. He's filling your head with lies. You've gone mad from all that longing." His voice softened for just a heartbeat. "Don't do this to us." The warrior's eyes flicked between them, unreadable, then landed firmly back on Emma. He said nothing more, yet his silence pressed against her, a steady reminder that she was not invisible. The weight of the moment was unbearable. Emma felt like a rope pulled from both ends, Mark, tethered to the life she had built and the vows she had sworn, and Nanton, pulling her toward something forbidden yet luminous, a promise she had never dared hope for. The rifle shook in Mark's hands. "Emma, come here. Now?" Her feet refused to move. She could see the years stretched before her, the quiet cabin, the empty cradle, the silent meals. A life defined by absence. And then she could feel, just as vividly, the words Nanton had spoken, "Even barren ground can bloom." Her lungs burned. "Mark, I can't." The rifle roared before she finished. The sound split the air, echoing off the canyon walls. Emma screamed, clapping her hands to her ears as the bucket crashed to the ground. Nanton had already moved, fast as a hawk diving. He rolled behind a boulder, the bullet striking sparks off stone instead of flesh. "God help me!" Mark cried, fumbling with the lever to chamber another round. His hand shook violently, his anger unraveling into desperation. But when Emma's scream turned into sobs, he froze. She fell to her knees, dust rising around her, clutching at the earth like it might hold her steady. Mark's chest heaved. "Emma," his voice cracked, softer now, wounded. "I don't want to lose you." Through blurred vision, Emma looked. At him, then at Nanton emerging slowly from behind the rock, his chest rising, unhurt but unyielding. Two men. Two worlds. And her soul, split in two, caught between the fire of loyalty and the fire of possibility. Emma's sobs shook her shoulders as she pressed her palms into the dirt, wishing it could swallow her whole. The world had become unbearable, her husband's gun smoking in the fading light. The Apache warrior crouched like a mountain cat behind. Stone, and her heart torn raw in the open for both men to see. Mark's boots crunched toward her. "Emma," he said, his voice ragged, almost pleading now. "Come home. This ends here." She lifted her head slowly, dust clinging to her wet cheeks. Behind her, Nanton rose from cover, tall and steady, no weapon in his hands, only a defiant calm that made Mark's finger twitch on the rifle trigger. "Don't move," Mark barked, raising the gun again. His jaw worked as though every muscle in his body strained to hold back. Emma stood unsteadily, torn between them. Her throat burned. "Stop this, both of you, please." Nanton's gaze softened on her. "The earth cracks when water is denied. A woman cracks when love is withheld. You should not live in emptiness, Emma." His words rolled like thunder over the prairie, echoing with certainty. Mark snarled, "Shut your mouth." His voice broke, but Emma saw the flash of pain beneath. His anger. She remembered nights long ago when he held her close, whispered about a house full of children's laughter. Now every one of those dreams had withered under the weight of disappointment. Emma lifted a hand toward Mark, pleading, "You don't see me anymore. He does." The confession ripped out of her, leaving her trembling. Mark's eyes widened, as though she had struck him. "See you? Emma, I've worked my back into the ground to build this life for us. I've broken myself so we could survive out here. You think I don't see you?" His voice faltered. "I see you. I don't know how to fix what's broken." Nathan's deep voice carried over the silence. "Not all things are broken. Some are waiting to be born." The sun slid lower, staining the sky with blood-red streaks. A coyote howled in the distance, and the world felt suspended, like the desert itself was holding its breath. Mark's hands trembled on the rifle. He looked from Emma to the warrior, veins bulging in his neck. At last, with a guttural sound, he lowered the barrel. The weapon clattered against the rocks as he let it fall. Emma exhaled, weak with relief. But Mark's shoulders sagged in defeat rather than peace. "If he means so much to you," he muttered, his eyes blazing with grief, "then maybe I'm the one who should leave." He turned sharply, mounting his horse with rigid movements. Dust exploded under the hooves as he rode hard toward the horizon, vanishing into the crimson haze. Emma stood frozen, chest aching, the echo of hoofbeats like hammer blows in her chest. She wanted to call after him, but no words came. She could only clutch her arms around herself. As though holding the pieces of her life together, Nanton stepped closer, but slow, cautious, as though approaching a wounded doe. His broad chest rose and fell, the firelight of the sky etching every scar across his skin. "You chose nothing yet," he said softly. "But the ground has shifted. What was buried now rises." Emma's lips trembled. "He's my husband." "And yet," Nanton said, "your spirit does not belong to him." The words struck her harder than the rifle shot. Her breath caught, and she staggered back a step. "You don't know me." His eyes, dark and steady, did not waver. "I know sorrow. I know the hunger of a heart that beats with no child's laughter to answer it. I know the fire of a woman who has not been seen." Emma's throat tightened. "Why are you saying these things to me?" Nanton looked past her, to the cradle of canyon and sky that stretched forever. "Because I was sent a vision. A woman with hair of wheat, standing beside me with children at her feet. I did not believe it, not until I saw you." Emma's breath left her in a rush. Her hands trembled at her sides, and for the first time in years, a sliver of something dangerous and bright flickered in her chest. Hope, but that hope was tangled in guilt. For the man she had just watched ride away, she stared at the warrior, at his broad shoulders and unwavering eyes, and realized she stood at the edge of an earth that had cracked wide open. One wrong step, and her whole life would tumble into the canyon below. The next morning, the prairie awoke with a fragile hush. Birds sang warily from cottonwood branches, and the creek whispered as if afraid to disturb the earth. Emma moved quietly through the cabin, her hands brushing the empty cradle. The ache in her chest remained, sharper now that Mark had left in defeat. She didn't know where to go, what to do. But something inside her urged her forward toward the promise Nanton had spoken of. She remembered his words. "The ground has shifted. What was buried now rises." They had resonated like thunder in her bones, igniting a courage she hadn't felt in years. Emma tied her skirt high, tucked a small satchel of dried bread and water over her shoulder, and walked toward the cottonwood grove by the creek, where the warrior had vanished after the confrontation. The shadows of the trees stretched long and skeletal across the ground, and the scent of sage drifted through the air. Then she saw him. Nanton leaned against a massive trunk, arms crossed over his chest, eyes closed as though listening to some secret music of the earth. The morning light gleamed across his bronzed, muscular torso, glinting off the tribal jewelry that adorned himbo necklaces, leather armbands, and turquoise beads strung in patterns that told stories she could not read. The sight made her pulse quicken, but it was more than his appearance that drew her near, was the serenity he carried, the certainty that he had somehow carved his place in the world that had ignored her. "I didn't think you would come," Nanton said, eyes opening slowly, dark and fatomless. Emma swallowed hard. "I had to." Her voice trembled. "I don't belong there anymore, not with him, not in that life." The warrior studied her, his gaze steady and unwavering. "Then you belong here," he said softly. "But it is not simply a place, it is a choice." Emma knelt beside him on the warm earth, brushing a handful of dust from her skirt. "I don't understand," she whispered. "How could you promise me a family? I am barren." Nanton shook his head slowly. "The body is one thing, the heart another. There are ways to honor life even when the womb cannot give it. And sometimes the spirits reward those who have suffered most. The children you long for, they will come. But you must have courage first." The words filled her with a strange warmth, a hope she had almost forgotten existed. She glanced at the creek, sparkling in the morning sun, imagining children laughing along its banks, chasing butterflies, their small hands brushing hers. A rustle in the brush pulled her attention. Emma's heart leapt. Could it be Mark returning? Or another threat? But it was only a doe stepping gracefully between the trees, its ears flicking nervously. The prairie held its breath with her. Nanton rose, brushing dirt from his pants. "You must understand, Emma, that to receive this, you cannot cling to what has left you. You must step fully into what is coming." Emma nodded, trembling. "And if I fail?" "You will not," he said firmly, his hand brushing briefly over hers, warm and grounding. "The ground cracks for a reason. The seed waits for the rain." Her mind swirled with images of children, laughter, and hope. But even as she pictured that life, a shadow fell across the clearing. Emma turned sharply, heart thundering. Mark. He stood at the edge of the grove, hat in hand, his eyes wild and conflicted. His mouth opened and closed, but no words came. Emma felt a pang of guilt, but it was drowned by the certainty in Nanton's presence. The warrior stepped in front of her, shielding her from the sharp angles of Mark's gaze. "Do not come closer," Nanton said quietly, but with the authority of the canyon itself. Mark's shoulders slumped, the tension in his body giving way to something raw and human. Grief, frustration, and a dawning realization that he could not force Emma to live a life she had already left behind. He gave a shaky exhale and turned slowly, walking away, leaving Emma and Nanton alone beneath the cottonwoods. Emma sank to the ground beside the creek, her hands brushing water over her face. The warrior sat quietly beside her, no need for words now. The creek sang, the wind whispered through leaves, and the world felt fragile but alive. For the first time in years, Emma allowed herself to imagine the life she had been promised, not just hope, but a future she could step into. A life where barren earth could bloom, where the impossible could be made real. And with Nanton's presence beside her, she began to believe that maybe, just maybe, it already had. Days passed with the relentless sun beating down on the prairie, but Emma no longer felt empty inside. Her heart, cracked and hollow for so long, began to fill with something new: courage, curiosity, and a fragile hope she dared not name aloud. She met Nanton each morning at the creek, under the cottonwoods where the light danced across the water. He taught her to track the deer along the ridge, to recognize the songs of birds, and to read the wind for warnings of storms or strangers. Each lesson was more than survival. It was life she had never known, a rhythm she had longed for in a world that had ignored her suffering. "Do you always move like the wind?" she asked one morning, watching him leap over a fallen log with effortless grace, muscles rippling under sun-bronzed skin. He glanced back, a half-smile teasing the corners of his mouth. "The wind is patient, Emma. It does not rush, but it does not wait either. You must learn the same." Emma tried, stumbling through the underbrush, but laughed at herself. For the first time in years, she felt free. And when she looked at him, muscular, shirtless, long black hair catching the sun, tribal jewelry glinting across his chest and arms, her heart twisted not just with desire, but with gratitude for his presence. One afternoon, as they sat beside the creek, Nanton reached into a small pouch at his side and pulled out a carved wooden figurine, a tiny child, hands outstretched, standing beside a mother. "This is the first promise," he said, placing it gently in Emma's hands. "It is small, but it is real. It is proof that what is barren can bloom." Emma held it carefully, her fingers trembling. "How can this mean anything?" Nanton's gaze met hers, unwavering. "Because it is the seed of belief. You cannot force life, but you can nurture it. You must believe before it comes. The Great Spirit will honor courage and hope." Emma closed her eyes, letting the warmth of the sun and the sound of water soothe her ache. The wind stirred her hair, carrying the faint scent of sage from Nanton's body. She opened her eyes to meet his again, and for the first time she spoke what she had longed to say: "I want it. I want a family. I want children to laugh in this world, to feel life in their hands." Nanton's lips curved in a rare, gentle smile. "Then you will have it. But first you must let go of the past." Emma's chest tightened. Letting go of Mark, of the life she had expected, felt like stepping off a cliff into the unknown. But every time she looked at Nanton standing firm and unwavering, she felt a strength that matched the earth beneath her feet. The days turned into weeks, and Emma began to notice small changes, signs she hadn't dared hope for. A wildflower bloomed in the dust near her cabin. Birds nested in the cottonwoods that overlooked the creek. And in her heart, the seed Nanton had given her began to root. One evening, as the sky blazed crimson and gold, Nanton took her hand and guided her to a spot on the ridge overlooking the prairie. Below, the land stretched endlessly, golden and wild, alive with possibility. "This is where the future begins," he said, his voice low, resonant, like a drumbeat that echoed across the hills. "Here, we plant the promise. Here you will see it grow." Emma's eyes filled with tears, a mixture of joy, fear, and awe. "Do you truly believe it will happen?" "I do," he said, "because the Great Spirit moves through courage and hope. And you, Emma, are brave enough to accept it." For the first time in her life, Emma believed. The barren ache that had hollowed her for years softened. She clutched Nanton's hand, feeling the warmth and strength in his calloused fingers, and for the first time allowed herself to imagine a life filled with laughter, children, and the kind of love that did not abandon or betray. The prairie. Wind rose around them, as if blessing the moment, stirring Nanton's long black hair and Emma's skirts. In that golden light, she understood something that no sorrow, no struggle, no past failure could ever take away. The future was hers to claim, and she was ready to step into it. The days that followed were gentle, yet each one carried the weight of an unspoken question. Could hope survive the harshness of the prairie? Emma woke each morning with the sun warming her face, feeling the promise of Nanton's words settle into her bones like a seed waiting to bloom. But even as she laughed with him, learned the subtle whispers of the wind, and tracked deer along the ridge, doubt lingered like a shadow. One morning the prairie was ablaze with gold and crimson. Emma tied her hair back and followed Nanton to a small plateau overlooking the canyon. The air was dry, scented with sage and earth, and the distant mountains shimmered with heat. He stopped, towering above her like a living monument, muscular, shirtless, long black hair glinting in the sunlight, tribal jewelry of bone, turquoise, and leather armbands catching the light. "Today," Nanton said, voice low but steady, "you will face the trial of trust." Emma's stomach twisted. "Trial?" she asked, heart pounding. "The Great Spirit tests all who seek to claim what has been denied. You must confront fear, the shadow of the past, and the uncertainty of what is to come." His eyes were dark, calm, yet burning with intensity. "Do you accept this?" She nodded, trembling. "I do." He guided her to the edge of the plateau, where the ground sloped sharply into the canyon. Below, the river carved a silver ribbon through the dust and rock. "Jump," he commanded. Emma's eyes widened. "Jump? Into the river?" Nanton did not flinch. "Trust the water. Trust yourself." "Trust me." Her pulse raced. The canyon was wide, the drop unforgiving. Her mind screamed of danger, of failure, of what she had lost before. Yet beneath that fear, a spark of courage ignited, the same courage that had brought her to Nanton, that had allowed her to believe in the promise of family and hope. With a deep breath, Emma bent her knees and leaped. The wind roared past her, ears as she fell, heart pounding like a drum. Time seemed to stretch, stretching fear and faith into a single moment. Then the river caught her, cold and rushing, and she tumbled in the current, gasping. The water fierce but alive. Strong arms encircled her, lifting her from the water. Nanton's dark eyes locked onto hers, unwavering. "You trusted," he said simply. "You faced the fear that would have held you back. That is the first step toward what is coming." Emma's chest heaved, cold water dripping from her hair. She clung to him, shivering, yet smiling despite the chill. I did it." "Yes," he said, guiding her to the riverbank. "And the world has shifted again. Fear does not own you. Doubt does not define you. You have begun to claim your future." The sun dipped lower, turning the sky to molten gold and crimson, reflecting off the water in dazzling shards. Emma felt something stir deep within, a sensation she had not felt in years. The fragile, undeniable heartbeat of hope, mingled with the warmth of being seen and valued. As they walked back to the cottonwoods, Emma's satchel of essentials slapping lightly against her hip, she glanced at Nanton. He remained unshaken, steadfast, the epitome of strength and wisdom. "Will it really happen?" she whispered. Nanton's gaze softened. "Yes, Emma, the seed has been planted. You have shown courage, faith, and trust. The Great Spirit honors those who act with heart. You will have the family you long for." Emma exhaled, letting the words sink into her soul. The barren ache that had haunted her for decades seemed to fade like mist under the rising sun. And though the future remained uncertain, the promise felt real, palpable, alive. For the first time, she allowed herself to imagine children running along the creek, laughing in the cottonwood shade, their voices carrying across the prairie. She pictured a home filled with warmth, love, and the fulfillment of dreams she had never dared to whisper aloud. The wind stirred around them, tugging at Emma's skirts and Nanton's long black hair. In that moment, the vast prairie seemed to embrace them both, whispering its approval. The trial had been faced, trust had been earned, and the promise bigger than either could imagine waited just beyond the horizon. The first light of dawn spilled across the prairie, painting the horizon with gold and rose. Emma stood at the edge of the cottonwood grove, the creek at her feet, and felt a stillness she had never known. For the first time, the ache of barrenness had softened, replaced by a pulse of hope that thrummed in her chest. Nanton emerged from the grove, muscular, shirtless, long black hair flowing freely, tribal jewelry of bone, turquoise, and leather armbands glinting in the sun. He moved toward her with a quiet grace, and Emma's heart leapt. His dark eyes, steady and unwavering, carried a weight of promise that made her knees weak. "Today," he said, voice like distant thunder softened by warmth, "the seed begins to bloom." Emma's lips trembled. "I can feel it," she whispered, glancing at the cradle her mother had stitched, still empty, yet somehow filled now with expectation. Nanton knelt beside her, taking her hands in his. "Your courage has opened the way. You have faced fear, trusted, and embraced hope, and now the spirits honor your heart." The air shifted. The wind picked up, rustling the cottonwood leaves, carrying the scent of sage and the earthy warmth of the prairie. Emma closed her eyes, letting it wash over her, feeling a deep, unspoken connection to the land, to the river, and to Nanton. Suddenly, a soft cry echoed from the grove. Emma's eyes flew open, and her heart skipped. There, nestled among the soft grasses, a tiny bundle stirred a baby, small and perfect, with dark hair curling at the nape of its neck. Tears streamed down Emma's cheeks as she knelt, her hands trembling as she lifted the child into her arms. Nanton placed a strong hand on her shoulder, steadying her as she held the infant close. "The promise has been fulfilled," he said, softly. "Life blooms where hope is tended." Emma rocked the baby gently, overwhelmed by a flood of emotions: awe, gratitude, love, and relief. She had longed for this for so many years, and now the impossible had arrived. Her heart swelled, and the emptiness that had haunted her for decades vanished into the morning light. The warrior crouched beside her, his hand brushing hers, and she felt the warmth of his strength and the depth of his presence. "We will build a family," he said, his voice steady and full of certainty. "Not just in blood, but in love, care, and protection. This is our path." Emma looked at him, tears catching the sunlight. "I never thought I could feel this again. I never thought I could believe." "You believed," Nanton said, "even when doubt whispered. And because you did, the spirits answered." The creek bubbled and sparkled, the cottonwood swayed, and birds sang overhead. Emma could feel the pulse of life all around her, a vibrant chorus celebrating the fulfillment of a long-awaited dream. Hours passed as Emma cradled the baby, Nanton beside her, and the prairie stretched endlessly, alive with golden light. She knew challenges would come. Life in the West was never simple, but she had learned courage, trust, and hope. And most importantly, she had learned that even barren hearts could bloom when nurtured by love. As the sun climbed higher, Nanton lifted his hands to the sky, whispering a soft prayer of gratitude to the Great Spirit. Emma joined him, her own voice mingling with the wind, the river, and the prairie, a hymn of life and renewal. For the first time in years, she laughed a sound as bright and free as the river below. She looked down at the baby, fingers curling around tiny hands, and then at Nanton, standing tall, muscular, and unwavering, long black hair catching the sunlight, tribal jewelry glinting across his chest. The promise had been kept. The barren earth had bloomed. And Emma, once hollow and alone, had found the family she had longed for, in the arms of a warrior who had seen her heart before anyone else ever could. The prairie stretched endlessly before them, golden and alive, carrying the promise of laughter, love, and generations to come. Emma breathed deeply, feeling the wind, the sun, and the pulse of life all around her. She had waited for a miracle, and the miracle had arrived.